Kitsune. In 12th century Japan, a mysterious woman appeared at the imperial court. She called herself Tamamo no Mei. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed to know everything, from poetry and astronomy to Buddhist teachings. Before long, she became the emperor's most trusted companion. But then, the emperor suddenly became gravely ill. No physician could explain why. Finally, a court diviner suspected Tamamo no Mei herself. During a ritual, her human appearance began to fade, revealing something beneath her silk robes, golden fur, and 9 tails. Tamamo no Mei was, according to legend, a powerful kitsune, a fox spirit. Exposed, she fled the palace and transformed into a massive fox. The emperor sent warriors after her, and they finally cornered her on the plains of Nasu. But legend says her story didn't end there. Her spirit became trapped inside a poisonous boulder called the Sesho Siki, the Killing Stone. And then, in 2022, the real Killing Stone suddenly cracked in half. Naturally, people began asking one question: had the 9-tailed fox finally escaped? Selkie. On the wild coast of the Orkney Islands, a fisherman walked the shore one moonlit night and saw dozens of seals resting on the rocks. But as he watched, something strange happened. They slipped from their skins, and where seals had been, women now stood dancing barefoot on the sand. The fisherman crept closer and stole one of the skins. When dawn came, the other Selkies returned it to the sea, but one woman remained behind, unable to find her skin. With no way to return to the water, she eventually became the fisherman's wife. Years passed and they had children together, but she never stopped looking toward the sea. One day, while the fisherman was away, his youngest daughter discovered the hidden seal skin and brought it to her mother. The moment the Selkie touched it, she knew she was finally free. She kissed her children goodbye and walked into the sea. When the fisherman returned, his wife was gone, and according to the old stories, on calm nights, a seal can sometimes be seen near that same shore, watching the land for a little too long before disappearing beneath the waves. Rokurokubi. In Edo period, Japan, a traveling merchant named Kenji once stopped at a quiet farmhouse in the mountains. A young woman lived there with an elderly servant, and she kindly offered him food and a place to sleep. Exhausted from the road, Kenji thanked her and quickly fell asleep. But sometime during the night, he woke to a strange sound. At first, he thought it was someone moving across the floor. Then, he looked up. His hostess was still lying on her futon, apparently asleep, but her neck had stretched impossibly far across the room, carrying her head toward the kitchen. Her long hair dragged behind her as she moved silently through the darkness. Kenji had heard old stories about the Rokurokubi, people who looked completely ordinary during the day, but whose necks stretched to unnatural lengths while they slept. Some stories said they didn't even know what happened to them at night. Others blamed the condition on curses, broken vows, or sins from the past. Kenji stayed completely still, terrified that she might notice him. Before dawn, the strange neck slowly returned to normal, and the woman woke as though nothing had happened. She smiled and asked whether he had slept well. Kenji simply nodded. He thanked her, gathered his belongings, and left before sunrise. He never stayed in that farmhouse again. Changeling. In Irish and British folklore, people once told frightening stories about children being secretly replaced by fairies. One of the strangest versions begins with a mother who notices that her baby has suddenly changed. The child no longer behaves normally. It cries constantly, seems unusually hungry, and sometimes appears to possess an intelligence far beyond its years. The mother becomes convinced that the fair folk have taken her real child and left a changeling behind. But how could she prove it? An old piece of folklore offered a bizarre test. She was told to put water into empty eggshells and place them over the fire. The idea was simple. If the creature in the cradle was really a fairy, it wouldn't be able to resist commenting on something so strange. And eventually, it spoke. The child suddenly revealed an ancient voice and complained that despite having lived for hundreds of years, it had never seen anyone boil water in an eggshell. The mother immediately understood. According to the tale, the trick had exposed the creature's true age, and the fairies eventually returned the stolen child. The story sounds bizarre today, but the eggshell test appears in several traditional changeling tales collected in Ireland and Britain. Naga Princess, one of Cambodia's most famous legends, tells of a meeting between a foreign prince and a mysterious Naga princess. The prince is known in Khmer tradition as Preah Thong, while the princess is commonly called Nayan Nayak. According to one version, Preah Thong arrived in a strange land and encountered Naing Nayak, the daughter of the Naga king. But she wasn't an ordinary princess. She belonged to the powerful serpent beings believed to live beneath the waters. Preah Thong and Naing Nayak fell in love, and the Naga king eventually accepted their marriage. Then came the most extraordinary part of the legend. The land was surrounded by water, so the Naga king used his supernatural power to create dry land for the newly married couple. In some versions, he is said to have drunk away the waters covering the land. That newly revealed territory became connected with the legendary origin of the Khmer kingdom. The story isn't treated as literal history. It's a founding legend explaining the ancient relationship between the Khmer people, their land, and the Nagas, and its influence didn't disappear. The union of Preah Thong and Naing Nayak remains part of traditional Khmer wedding symbolism, where the bride's scarf can represent the serpent princess's tail. Tengu, before he became the famous samurai general Minamoto no Yoshitsune, he was simply a young boy named Ujiwaka Maru. After his father was killed during a period of war, the boy was sent to Mount Kurama. He was lonely, angry, and surrounded by people he barely knew. But the mountain had its own inhabitants. According to legend, powerful spirits called Tengu lived among the trees. They were often described as proud mountain beings with red faces and enormous noses, feared by ordinary people, but respected by those who understood the mountains. And one Tengu in particular became interested in the young boy. His name was Sojobo, the legendary king of the Tengu. Rather than frightening Ushiwakamaru away, he began teaching him. Night after night, the boy supposedly disappeared from the temple and trained secretly in the forest. He learned swordsmanship. He learned strategy. And according to the stories, he learned things no ordinary teacher could have taught him. Years later, Yoshitsune became one of Japan's most brilliant military commanders. His victories were so extraordinary that people struggled to explain them. Perhaps the Tengu really had trained him, or perhaps the story simply gave a supernatural explanation to a remarkable young warrior. Either way, the legend never forgot the mountain where his story supposedly began. Doppelgänger. In 1822, Percy Shelley was living in Italy with Mary Shelley. That summer would be his last. Stories later circulated that Shelley had experienced something deeply unsettling, seeing a figure that appeared to be his own double. Mary Shelley also became associated with stories of strange visions surrounding her husband's final months. But here's where the legend gets complicated. The famous version, often repeated today, makes the doppelganger story sound like a perfectly documented prediction of Shelley's death. It wasn't. The details have been retold and embellished over time, and the surviving historical record doesn't prove that Shelley saw a supernatural version of himself. What is certain is that Shelley died in July 1822 when his sailing boat was caught in a storm near the Italian coast. He was only 29. Afterward, stories about strange visions surrounding his final days became part of the mythology surrounding his death. And that's how the idea of the doppelganger became so powerful. Across European folklore, seeing an exact double of yourself was sometimes interpreted as an omen, particularly an omen of death or disaster. There's no scientific evidence that seeing a double predicts someone's death, but as a story, it's incredibly unsettling because there's something uniquely disturbing about seeing someone who looks exactly like you and realizing you have absolutely no idea who you're looking at. Rougarou. Deep in the folklore of Louisiana's Cajun and Creole communities, there's a creature called the Rougarou. It's often described as a human transformed into something wolf-like, wandering through the swamps, forests, and fields at night. But the legend doesn't have just one origin story. In one tradition, the creature is connected to Catholic rules surrounding Lent. A person who repeatedly breaks the rules of Lent, sometimes for 7 years in a row, could supposedly become a loup-garou, a French werewolf-like creature. In Louisiana, that tradition became associated with the Rougarou. Other stories simply use the creature as a warning. Parents and elders could tell children that a Rougarou was hiding outside, waiting for anyone who misbehaved. And that's probably part of why the legend survived so well. The creature wasn't always meant to be taken as a literal monster. It was also a way of teaching people to respect rules, religion, and the dangers of wandering into the darkness alone. Descriptions vary, too. Some stories imagine the Rougarou as a person wearing an animal-like disguise. Others describe a creature with the head of a wolf or dog. But the creepiest part remains the same. The monster may not be a monster at all. It might be a person you know, cursed to become something else when night falls.